Hi again, how's it going? I know. I'll get too excited. Alright, appreciate it. Well, I want to get just right into this. Um, can you read that? Okay, this is from Freemasonry Lodge, whatever. It's from the this was a speech given at Crescent Lodge number 23 at Cedar Rapids, Iowa, so right here in the good old state of Iowa, by a Mason, Dr. Thomas E. Green, The Dream of the Ages. To you who have researched, these New World Order people and organizations, know that that is what he pretty much is referencing. The Dream of the Ages, the coming utopia, the new Atlantis, or whatever. But this is by Dr. Thomas E. Green, Director, National Bureau of Speakers, American Red Cross, past Grand Prelate, Grand Commandery of Iowa Knights Templar. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, printed for private distribution 1921. So exactly 100 years ago, this was not meant for public viewing. And I wonder why. Right? Because they want to people the idea that these are just harmless fraternal orders that don't get involved with political affairs, that don't do anything big. They just basically run around, do fraternal pranks on each other, and ride the goat, whatever, sonic jokes or whatever they do. But they don't want you to think that they're actually engaged and involved with building some kind of a new world order, right? So that's why it's probably printed for private distribution, I imagine. This booklet is the 11th in a series issued from the Iowa Masonic Library at Cedar Rapids, Iowa, for distribution among the Master Masons of this jurisdiction, and as soon as I get this video uploaded, I will provide the link so you can go read it yourself. Now remember, this is coming from their side, so of course they're going to sound like little angels. They're going to make this sound like, that they're going to reference the New Jerusalem. It's like John Lennon's Imagine, right? It sounds great on the surface. I'm sure Karl Marx would have loved it. But, anyways. The Dream of the Ages. Get a quick drink of water. Today is the feast of St. John the Evangelist. He and St. John the Baptist, known together as the Holy Saints John of Jerusalem, have been from its early beginnings the patrons of our craft and the protectors of its perpetuity. Both of them had companied with the Supreme Master, whose teachings of righteousness, of justice, and of truth have come down across the flight of centuries, the foundation of true ethics, the inspiration of the true philosophy of life. Early in his life, St. John the Baptist had fallen victim to the hatred and vindictiveness of those whom he rebuked for sin and called to repentance. The tragedy of Calvary and succeeding years of turmoil and conflict had eliminated both the Master and his disciples. All save one had passed from arduous labor and incessant conflict to refreshment and rest. It is the last year of the first century. On a little island cradled in the laughing waters of the Aegean Sea, St. John the Evangelist is spending the last year of his earthly life. I shall never forget a morning a few years ago when from the deck of a steamer very early in the day I looked on sea-bound Patmos. We had left the Piraeus and were crossing to Joppa, whence we should go up to Jerusalem. It had been a night of serene and perfect beauty, the sea tranquil and calm, kissed only by the straying breezes, whose touch made even more beauteous its placid, wide expanse of sapphire blue and overarching sky, feckless and clean and amethystine bowl, in whose deep and velvety expanse there blaze like jewels myriads of sparkling stars. And then slow, rising from the cradling deep, the silver radiance of a perfect moon, round as a shield, and shimmering with the silver sheen that touched the sky, and caressed the sea, and filled the softly palpitating air with a splendor ethereal and sublime. Into that silver radiance the ship went, riding languorously over the long full swells of the placid sea, leaving behind her a wake of glory that in the sparkling moonbeams glistened and shone as though she left 10,000 jewels in her train. To sleep on such a night seemed sacrilege, when one could stand beneath the star-sprent sky and breathe the air that in an earlier day inspired the glory that was Greece, and with soft zephyrs lulled the sapphire isles of dreams. When at last, because tomorrow brought a new unfolding of experience, we drifted gently down the tides of sleep, it was with the warning that if all went well, by day dawn we should pass the island of the apocalypse. It was in the first flush of the morning that I stood beside the captain on the bridge, peering forward in the gray scud, that half mist, half spume, whirled like a horde of dancing phantoms in the train of its insubstantial night. The morning breezes freshened. Thinner and thinner grew the haze, until, as if in answer to the touch of a magic wand, quote, flames leaped into the forehead of the morning sky, unquote, and over the rippling sea and through the arch of heaven the day came forth to greet the world. From the captain, used to this daily miracle of night and dawn, there came a word, as with his finger pointed across the sea, he said, quote, there is Patmos, unquote. In between me and the scarce rising sun, I saw it like a shadowy throne, resting on a sea of golden splendor, around it like an aureole of mystic radiance, the waving streamers of the light. And then as suddenly as it has sprung in sight, it faded from our vision as if a curtain had fallen on stage of yesterday and it was gone. On this Patmos, in the year 99, St. John of Jerusalem is banished for his faith. On such a morning, sitting there, his mind tranquilized by the deft and soothing touch of nature's ministry, he is alone with all that is left to age in his closing hours, memory and dreams. Memory bears him back across the long life that he has lived. He remembers the call that came in his young manhood from the Master beside the Sea of Galilee. He recalls the 3 years crowded with the events of the world's greatest tragedy. He remembers the day when, inspired by a compelling spirit, a band of 12 went forth from the temple to carry the word of the Master throughout the world. He remembers the ceaseless conflict that had raged through all these years between these two forces, each the other's opposite, exclusive mutually in the dominancy of human thought and action. On the one side, Rome, the majestic, the mighty Rome with her marching legions, her tossing banners, and her screaming eagles. Rome with her purpled Caesar and her worldwide domain. On the other side, Bethlehem with its shepherds and its star. Jordan with its mystical symbol and its dove of peace. Calvary with its cross on the hill, but everywhere the touch of the eternal, the challenge of brotherhood, the voice of the soul. He remembers the mighty conflict that has raged throughout all the ages between the powers of might and the courage of righteousness, between the black magic and the white, between the lodge of darkness and the lodge of light. It had been a losing fight for the Nazarene, as men might judge battles. Years were still to pass before an emperor of Rome should snatch the lifeblood from the death wound in his side, and flinging it against the arching sky should cry, quote, thou hast conquered, O Nazarene, unquote. One after another, his companions in the apostolate had fought the good fight and finished their course. St. Thomas in faraway Malabar, where his name still lingers in the traditions of the Orient land. St. James in the land where the dark, mysterious waters foamed against the pillars of Hercules to become the St. Iago of Spain. St. Paul to the northern forests and to the far-off islands of the west to lay their foundations for the England that was to be. All of them had gone save him alone on Patmos. And Rome was passing from her golden age of might and power. The days of the Caesars had faded into the rebellious and revolutions which Titus and Vespasian had to deal. The Bolsheviki, we're referencing the Bolsheviks, of 2,000 years ago were hammering at the foundations of government and of society, where there were already manifest signs of decay. It was not time for Rome to die, but remember that no nation ever died of old age. They have died one after another in the annals of the ages, all of them from the dry rot bed of luxury and indulgence, the weakness and the that cankers and spreads from within. First in patrician arteries, and then as by dilution in plebeian veins, there was pulsing the fierce virus that betokened the decline and fall of Rome. St. John may not have known the complex coordinations of his memories, blending as they did into one great universal concordant of human experience. Quote, right forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, but that scaffold sways the future, for behind the dark and unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. But to St. John the world was reeling, the heavens were falling, the foundations of the great deep were breaking up. To him as to that ancient world, when Rome fell, fell the world, unquote. And so against the background of his memories, he turns by natural logic to his dreams. And he dreamed the dream of the ages, the dream of a new heaven and of a new earth, a world in which conflict should be abolished, in which wrongs should be subdued, in which happiness and concord should be enshrined, and men should live in universal peace, because it should be a new earth in which should dwell righteousness. It is the dream of the ages. Since history began its record, every great teacher has dreamed that dream. 1,000 years before, Zoroaster had left the symbolism of his faith in the sacred fire, expressive of the power that should destroy the dross and refine the pure metal in the lives of men. So, right here, I just wanted to add, just comment that this is how the New World Order basically manipulates everybody in these lower level Masonic dupes at the time that we're listening to this. That's how they dupe people into thinking that this is something that's part of some kind of divine plan. They go to Revelation and say, well, it's the new heavens and the new earth that have been prophesied in Scripture. And whatever you want to believe out of that, if you believe the Illuminati wrote the Bible, or if that's basically their playbook. I pondered that a couple times. It wasn't until I actually researched really deeply the eschatology of the Bible, of the New Testament in particular, found out that that might not be true. I don't know. It's one of those subjects that you're never going to fully know. But I do know that from what I read in the New Testament, just so I can clear this, and you can read it in the New Testament, Jesus seemed to hint that this end of the world, which really is a Greek word referring to an age, he was really talking about the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. I don't know if you guys researched that. I made a couple videos on my main channel on that, and how these mystery school guys are basically using the Bible, not that they wrote it, but they're basically using it as part of their script to manipulate mankind, whatever. But this new heaven and new earth or something was really symbolic of the new covenant age that manifested after the end of the old covenant age that was consummated at the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The preterists teach that. The preterist Christians, go look that up. I'm not sure if everything fulfilled in the Bible. I'm no expert in that, but I did point out in Luke 21, when he's talking about the end, Luke 21, 20 through 24, when he's talking about the fall of Jerusalem, in verse 22, he says, "For these are the days of vengeance, that all things written, all things of Scripture will be fulfilled." So, I guess it's whatever, maybe he really didn't mean that when he said that. I don't know. But I try to point that out to Christians who believe we're in the end times, and I get attacked for that. So, it's not my area I'm an exact expert in, but it's something to look at and ponder. But anyways, okay, so 5 centuries before, Buddha had sat in rapt contemplation under the sacred Bo tree and had found his hope for the future in renunciation and withdrawal from the affairs of the world. Confucius had written his remedy and maxims of obedience, conformity to law, a fatalistic bending to the powers that dominate the universe. Plato and Socrates had dreamed their dreams of the ideal state. Ideal state. You hear many humanists, socialists, collectivists refer to their coming, vision of utopia as to the ideal state. Okay, so, and had found in philosophy and pure reason, the basis for the constructive and the preservative philosophy that should save the world. And yet they had all served their little time, drifted into the long yesterday of the past. And once again the world was upside down, and in his solitude this old man is dreaming the secret of its remaking. And so he dreams above. Him the heavens seem to open to let down, and the supernal radiance of sunlit splendor there hangs before his vision the outline of a city, compact, symbolic, majestic, let down to earth from heaven. There is significance in the very first glimpse of his vision. It is a city. The earlier masters had never dreamed of that. Zoroaster, Buddha, Confucius, Plato, Socrates had centered their thought around the individual. To save one's self was the aim of philosophy and the final goal of faith. The vision on Patmos is wider. It sees not the individual, but the city. Remember, like I said, in this New World Order, from all the other stuff that I read recently, from Manly Hall, Alice Bailey, they seem to have this issue, this problem with the ideal state involving individual rights, and putting emphasis on the individual. It's about the community, not the individual. I pointed that out in the recent Lucis Trust article. That thing that stands for congested, contented humanity, that thing, that while tantamount to man's highest achievement, is yet a synonym of man's lowest lapse from comfort, virtue, and from right. Jerusalem, Antioch, Rome, Alexandria, Paris, London, Chicago, New York, the city congested, reeking with selfishness, daubed with degradation, redolent with the myriad stenches of depravity, it was the city that was to be redeemed. 20 centuries have swept by, and that for which the city stands is the rule of life. Save in the narrowest interpretation of a sort of philosophy, no longer the individual, but the community is the central thought of man's philosophy today. Not even the nation any longer, for internationalism is the measure and scope of plan and purpose. Strangely enough, not independence anymore, but interdependence is the watchword that brings safety, the force that stabilizes civilization. And that's, again, that's about the community, not the person, not the individual. The vision drew nearer, and as it stood in all of its splendor before his contemplation, one appeared as with a measuring rod, and behold, the city was not only ethereal but mystical, not only visionary but symbolic, for as it stood finished and complete, its length and its breadth and its height were equal. It is very evident that St. John was no architect. He may have chosen in his vision the strange perfect ashlar of construction, but there is neither beauty nor utility in such a building as these relations presuppose. The city whose length and breadth and height are equal is a mathematical monstrosity and architectural absurdity. A few years ago, when the great cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York was first proposed, a competition was established among architects as to the most impressive and practical design for the building that was to be. One architect, tired of the eternal sameness of Gothic and early English, of Italian and Byzantine, caught this vision of St. John as an inspiration and attempted to draw the working plans for a cathedral whose length, breadth, and height were equal. It became, of course, a curiosity among designers, and still hangs, I dare say, upon the walls of some architect's club, and evidence of what the mind can do when it lends itself to the guidance of a vivid imagination. Of course, the vision is as a parable. Its balanced proportion stands to us in the varied similitude of that which represents to a master mason his code of life, his canon of activity, the supreme result of his accomplishment, the perfect ashlar hewn from the rough, irregular mass of possibility until its angles are all the right angles, its face is all square, and equal, its length, breadth, and its height are one. In individual life it stands for a balanced character. In mathematics it stands for a proven equation. In ethics it stands for a perfect moral code. In political economy it stands for a governed world. There is a weird significance in numbers. These three dimensions that are visioned there are not only the measure of perfection, but they exhaust both symbolically and practically every possibility of relation and of extent. In our intensely practical and matter-of-fact age, we have swung far away from the esoteric interpretation of the great facts of the universe. Number and color, light and sound, shape and outline, the garments in which existence clothes itself have to the mind of our day lost the significance that they held in ancient symbolism. The 3 and 5s, the 7s and 9s of ancient architecture, speaking in each appearance with a symbolism that told of hidden truth, are for us mere numbers, significant only as they form steps on which we may tread or stories in which we may live. And yet this number 3, appearing as it does again and again in the rich symbolism of Masonic tradition and ritual, is so written in the structure of existence as to be an apparent part of the eternal order of things. So, when people are trying to call you nuts or look at you weird when you're looking at numbers and they're, as like some kind of code or something like that, just show them to the source that Masons themselves talk about, and King Kabbalists too, about the importance of numbers and symbolism, how they represent hidden truths. There are only these 3 possible dimensions: length, breadth, and height. By them all, material existence is measured, and even the imagination curbs itself within their restraint. There is no 4th dimension save in the disordered fancy of mathematical madness. There are only 3 forms of matter: liquid, solid, and gaseous, and in these categories all existence is included. The light ray that streams from our central sun is made up of 3 potencies: the color ray, the heat ray, and the actinic ray. You yourselves are made up of 3 parts: the body, the mind, and the soul. There are only 3 possible relations in which you can stand to God, to your neighbor, and to yourself. All existence follows in the same division. Your time is either yesterday, today, or tomorrow. By 3 steps you approach the illumination that reveals to your mind the world of hidden truth. In the battle of this present life, there are 3 foes that assail the excellence of your endeavor: the world, the flesh, and the devil. Against them, as spiritual weapons, you are giving fasting, prayer, and generosity. If with these you prevail, there may grow within you the saving graces of faith, hope, and charity, through which, as upon spiritual steps, you may rise into likeness with God, the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Preserver, 3 in 1. The mystical meaning, therefore, of St. John's vision is apparent. He is outlining in allegory the dimensions of life, the mensuration of character. Exactly the exhortation that your symbolism brings you when you are bidden, with the tools of a master mason in your hands, to take the rough, uncouth, and rugged mass of life's possibilities and opportunities, and by dint of earnest effort and sincere endeavor, bring them to the outlines of a perfect ashlar, whose length and whose breadth and whose height are equal. Manifestly, the first application is to the individual life, the development and the forming of the individual character. Length in this interpretation is the teen of individual existence, physically speaking. Of individual purpose, symbolically interpreted, in it are wrapped up all that go to make the assertive, progressive force by which man drives his purpose through. We call it aim, ambition, willpower, and dominant purpose. It is the shortest distance between 2 given points. It is equally the base upon which all geometrical structures are built. It has no beauty save that it is a fact. It encloses nothing, for it has merely extent. It begins, it continues, it ends. That is all. And if that is all life would be, but a beginning, a continuing, and an ending. The 2nd dimension is breadth. Physically interpreted, it means development, enlargement, increase. Symbolically interpreted, it means contact, mutuality, and brotherhood. It restrains ambition by reminding it of duty. It curbs aspiration by mutuality. From length joined with breadth, we form the mathematical square. Instead of a world of straight lines reaching on and on toward a single goal, we have a world of community, with common interests, common duties, with common obligations. They love that word common. Collectivist language and stuff like that. That's all anti-individualism. We all have a common duty and interest, and that is to the good of the whole. A world of community. It is flat to be sure, and relatively inert. It does not reach the dimension of a living perpendicular, but it takes man and turns him from his individualism into a social being. Okay? It takes man and turns him from his individualism into a social being. It becomes the basis of civilization. The third dimension is height in its physical interpretation, the exaltation of mind above matter, the enthronement of a power that dominates and controls. Symbolically, it is the enthronement of an ideal, the expression of the fact that neither the ambition of the individual nor indeed the mutuality of the many can reach their real attainment until they have realized in the comprehension of a dominating purpose of meaning in this thing called life. Getting pretty close here, so... Well, every time I think it'll just take me a half hour to read through this, looks like I got a way to go, so my 2 or 3, 2.5 videos I'm going to save at the most. It is this that in architecture lifted the dull level pave of man's highways on which he trod into the heaven-reaching spires, cross-capped witnesses to man's idealism on the wings of which he sought the stars. It is the sum total of life in that it is square piled upon square, an infinite progression, a perfect cube. Its lines all straight lines, its angles all right angles, each side a perfect square, and the length and the breadth and the height all equal. As master masons, we have been taught both the significance of this symbolism and its importance translated into symbols of daily life. However much or however little we may have esteemed its maxims of value, there has been set before it's the method by which our individual lives can be builded after such a pattern. The great fact of self-determination is characteristic of our humanity. From the very beginning there has been set before the human mind the eternal choice, good or evil, light or darkness, life or death. Excellence does not force itself upon human character, nor does it come by inheritance. To each man is given that power of choice that self-determines his character. Freemasonry is but another opportunity in the scheme which divine wisdom has devised for man's progress and final victory. What we have done with its admonition and its counsel depends upon ourselves. In the last analysis, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. But Freemasonry is not merely an individualistic philosophy. It does not cease merely with the development of the individual life or the rounding of the individual character. It is a system of thought and theory and action that aims at an infinitely wider ideal. It is bound up with the vision of its saintly patron, for it too seeks a balanced world. It too has for its aim a governed society, a new heaven, and a new earth in which dwelleth righteousness. Going back earlier, we know with this dream of the ages, this new heaven and new earth, what he's talking about. He's talking about a new world order. Clear. And he's calling it a new heaven and new earth. Putting in people's heads that this is some part of some kind of divine plan. St. John was one of them. Whatever you want to take out of that. Or whatever you want to believe. It's your business. But so we do know that they do, at least today, and going on for probably a couple centuries, few, I don't know how long, but they are using the Bible to a degree. They're at least manipulating it or getting people to think that what's happening is a part of this end of the age. And what they're thinking of age is the end of the age of Pisces and into the age of Aquarius. Which Pisces, I believe I've read somewhere, but I'm gonna get that first. I won't mention it until I grab it. But Aquarius, I think, as I read in certain sources, does represent world socialism. I would have to dig up the article or the thing that I read that talked about that, but okay, but I'm going to read this last paragraph before I end it. Just now the world is upside down, filled with the wreck and the ruin that war has left behind. It's World War I. Freemasonry is not worth its name, is not worthy of the record of its storied past. If into that ruined world it does not come, with its historic philosophy, attempt to rebuild the ruin, to reconstruct civilizations. There you go. And in this here, he's admitting that, their interest is in reconstructing civilization, basically. Their philosophy and their religion. So, looks like I'm at 30 minutes. I'm going to make a part 2 of this. So, thank you for watching and listening.